A memo was sent to the top 5 retailers in America in the fall of 2023. It was 14 pages long. It carried no dramatic title, no red stamp, no classification marking. It was formatted like every other internal strategy document that circulates between corporate headquarters and regional distribution managers. Arial font, single-spaced. A header that read, Q4 Inventory Optimization, Phase 3. Beneath the header, a distribution list of 11 names, each followed by a title: Senior Vice President of Category Management, Director of Supply Chain Analytics, Regional Inventory Strategist, the kind of titles that exist specifically to make the person holding them sound essential while remaining invisible. Blackwell has seen this memo, not because someone handed it over willingly, not because it was leaked to a journalist at a press conference, not because a congressional subcommittee subpoenaed it. Someone printed it on a Tuesday afternoon in a regional distribution office in Bentonville, Arkansas. They folded it into a plain white envelope. They mailed it to a P.O. box that does not appear in any corporate directory. The envelope had no return address. The postmark was from a town 40 miles away, not the town where the office is located. The only annotation on the document, written in blue ballpoint ink on the bottom margin of the last page, was a single sentence. They are removing everything. The phrase that matters appears on page 6. It appears once in a subsection titled Long-Tail SKU Rationalization. The phrase is Permanent Inventory Removal. 3 words, not capitalized in the original, not bolded, not highlighted. Embedded in the middle of a paragraph about quarterly margin targets, as though it were the most natural phrase in the English language. As though permanent and removal placed next to inventory should not make anyone pause. The phrase is not defined anywhere in the document. It is not explained. It is not introduced with context or caveats. It is presented as though every person reading the memo already understands what it means. And they do. Because this is not a new concept. This is not an innovation. This is the formalization of a process that has been underway, quietly, incrementally, across dozens of industries for more than a decade. The memo did not start it. The memo put it on paper. The memo gave it a schedule. This is not a story about empty shelves. That is important to establish now, at the beginning, because the phrase, items disappearing from stores, triggers a specific image. It triggers the image of bare metal racks, fluorescent lights buzzing over nothing, stripped-down aisles that look like a disaster just swept through. That is not what this is. Walk into any major grocery store in America right now, today, this afternoon, and you will see what appears to be abundance. You will see color. You will see variety. You will see towers of produce stacked in careful pyramids. Walls of cereal boxes arranged by color gradient. Freezer sections that stretch from one end of the building to the other, humming quietly, stuffed with options. It looks like more than enough. That is the point. It is engineered to look like more than enough. But something has changed, and the change is so quiet, so incremental, so carefully managed that most people will never notice it unless they are looking for one specific thing. One specific product that used to be on the 3rd shelf, on the left side, next to the store brand. And it is not there. And they ask someone in a vest, and the person in the vest checks a handheld scanner, and the answer is always the same, always delivered in the same tone. Neutral, final, unhelpful. We don't carry that anymore. 4 words, and then the conversation is over. There is no explanation. There is no alternative offered. There is no mechanism to request that the product return. We don't carry that anymore is not an apology. It is a wall. And behind that wall is a 14-page memo. Gerald Hutchins ran a pharmacy in Glenville, West Virginia, for 42 years. The town's population is 807. It has been 807, give or take a dozen, for as long as Gerald can remember. People are born there. People die there. Not many arrive. Not many leave. The nearest alternative pharmacy is a 53-minute drive on State Route 5, a 2-lane road that follows the Little Kanawha River and floods at least twice every spring. When the road floods, Gerald's pharmacy was the only source of medication for nearly 1,000 people spread across 3 hollows and 2 unincorporated communities. Gerald did not get rich running this pharmacy. He never expected to. He got by. He filled prescriptions, sold bandages and adhesive tape, kept a wire rack of reading glasses by the front door sorted by magnification, stocked a small selection of over-the-counter cold remedies, and knew every customer's name and most of their medical histories without checking a file. He knew which families had diabetes. He knew which children had asthma. He knew which elderly patients were on blood thinners and which ones forgot to take them. He was not just a pharmacist. In a town without a doctor's office, without an urgent care clinic, without any medical infrastructure at all, except a volunteer fire department with a first aid kit, Gerald Hutchins was the healthcare system. In March of 2024, Gerald closed the pharmacy. He did not retire. He did not sell the business. He did not pass it to a younger pharmacist. He locked the front door, taped a handwritten note to the glass with 2 strips of masking tape, and walked to his truck. The note said, "I am sorry, it is no longer possible." 7 words, 42 years of service reduced to 7 words on a piece of lined notebook paper. Blackwell called Gerald in April. The conversation lasted 2 hours and 11 minutes. Blackwell expected to hear about rent increases, about insurance costs, about regulatory burden, about competition from mail-order pharmacies, about the slow economic death that has been hollowing out small-town America for 30 years. Gerald mentioned all of those things, but none of them were the reason he closed. The reason was a single generic antibiotic called amoxicillin clavulanate. For context, amoxicillin clavulanate, sold under the brand name Augmentin, is one of the most commonly prescribed antibiotics in the world. It treats ear infections, sinus infections, urinary tract infections, dental abscesses, skin infections, lower respiratory infections. It is on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. It has been manufactured continuously since 1984. The patent expired decades ago. The drug is, by every clinical and pharmacological measure, ordinary, routine, boring. It is the medical equivalent of a Phillips head screwdriver. It is not glamorous. It does not make headlines. It simply works, reliably, for an enormous range of common conditions. For 40 years, amoxicillin clavulanate was the backbone of Gerald's practice. A child came in with an ear infection, amoxicillin clavulanate. An elderly man with a dental abscess and no dentist within an hour's drive, amoxicillin clavulanate. A woman with a urinary tract infection who could not afford the $80 copay for the branded alternative, amoxicillin clavulanate. Gerald dispensed it every single day for decades. The drug was not recalled. It was not pulled from the market for safety reasons. It was not replaced by a superior alternative. No study was published declaring it ineffective. No regulatory body issued a warning. The manufacturers simply stopped making it in sufficient quantities. Not all at once, gradually, the way a river dries up in a drought. You do not notice the water level dropping day by day. You notice one morning that the rocks are showing. First, the shipments became irregular. Gerald would order his usual quantity from his wholesaler, McKesson, the largest pharmaceutical distributor in the United States, and the order would arrive short. Instead of 500 tablets, he would receive 300, then 200, Then a note. __, quote _11 __. 4 to 6 weeks became 8 to 10 weeks. 8 to 10 weeks became __, quote _12 _. Gerald called McKesson multiple times. The representatives were polite. They were always polite. The answers were always the same. Quote 13, quote 14, quote 15. The equivalent product was a newer, patented combination antibiotic that cost 400% more per course of treatment and required prior authorization from an insurance company before it could be dispensed. Gerald's patients did not have insurance companies. Most of them were on Medicare, which covered part of the cost, but required paperwork that took days to process. Some were uninsured entirely. Some paid cash, $20, $30 for a 10-day course of amoxicillin clavulanate. The replacement drug cost $140 for the same duration. Gerald could not ask his patients to pay $140 for an ear infection. He could not ask a mother working 2 jobs in a town with no jobs to choose between her child's antibiotic and her electric bill. So Gerald started rationing. He would cut courses short, 7 days instead of 10. He would reserve his dwindling supply for the most severe cases. He would tell patients with mild infections to try over-the-counter remedies first and come back if things got worse. This is not how antibiotics work. This is not how medicine works. You do not ration essential medications in a country that spends $4.3 trillion a year on healthcare. But Gerald was not operating in the healthcare system. He was operating in the gap the healthcare system left behind. He tried to source it independently. He contacted compounding pharmacies in 3 states. He reached out to Canadian suppliers. He explored online pharmaceutical marketplaces that operate in the grey area between legitimate distribution and outright importation. He spent hours on the phone, hours on the computer, hours doing work that had nothing to do with being a pharmacist and everything to do with being the last line of defense for a town that had no other options. Every channel led to the same wall. The drug was not illegal. It was not unavailable globally. India manufactures it in enormous quantities. So does China. So does Bangladesh. The global supply of amoxicillin clavulanate is vast and stable. The shortage is specifically, exclusively, uniquely American. The machinery to produce it exists. The formula exists. The raw materials exist. The demand exists. The math does not. The math, the corporate math, the quarterly earnings math, the return on manufacturing capacity math, does not support producing a generic antibiotic that wholesales for pennies when the same production line can manufacture a patented alternative that wholesales for dollars. Gerald Hutchins closed his pharmacy because one antibiotic disappeared. But when Blackwell asked him to pull his inventory records, and Gerald keeps meticulous records, handwritten in ledger books that he has maintained since 1982, the picture was worse than one antibiotic. Over the previous 3 years, 23 separate medications had either vanished from his supply chain entirely or become so erratically available that he could not reliably promise his patients he could fill their prescriptions. 23 drugs. Not experimental drugs, not specialty drugs, not niche compounds for rare diseases. 23 of the most ordinary, most essential, most commonly used medications in primary care. Blood pressure medications, thyroid medications, anti-nausea drugs, antifungals, corticosteroid creams, basic, fundamental, decades-old pharmaceuticals that any pharmacy in America should be able to stock as reliably as a grocery store stocks salt. None recalled, none banned, none found to be dangerous, all simply allowed to become extinct through the quiet mechanics of corporate arithmetic. The machinery existed, the formulas existed, The patients existed. The profit did not. Now, here is where the story shifts direction. Because if this were only about one pharmacist in one town, it would be a tragedy, but not a pattern. It would be a local story, a human interest segment on the evening news, a sad anecdote in a congressional hearing that leads to expressions of concern and no action. Blackwell does not investigate tragedies. Blackwell does not tell sad stories about good people who got unlucky. Blackwell investigates patterns, and the pattern here extends far beyond Glenville, West Virginia, far beyond pharmacies, far beyond medications. 740 miles northeast of Glenville, in a town called Athol, Massachusetts, population 11,800, there is a hardware store called Griswold & Sons. It occupies a two-story brick building on Main Street that has housed the same business since 1947. 3 generations. Walter Griswold opened it. His son Thomas expanded it. Robert Griswold runs it now. Robert is 58 years old. He has a beard that has been grey for a decade, hands that have never been fully cleaned since he started working the counter at 16, and a detailed opinion about every fastener, fitting, blade, handle, and hinge that has ever passed through his inventory. Blackwell visited Griswold & Sons in June of 2024. The original purpose of the visit was unrelated to this investigation. Blackwell was looking into something else entirely, a story about building code changes in New England that never went anywhere. But Robert said something in the first 5 minutes of the conversation that stopped everything. He was standing in front of a wall of pegboard shelving that had recently been reorganized. New labels, new product placements. He pointed to an entire section, maybe 40 linear feet of wall space, and said, ___, quote _16___. Robert was not making a philosophical point. He was not being nostalgic. He was describing a material change in his inventory that had occurred rapidly, recently, and without any request from his customers. He walked Blackwell through the section, item by item, with the patience and precision of a man who has organized hardware for 40 years. The hand drills were gone, not sold out, discontinued by every major manufacturer and distributor he works with. Stanley, DeWalt, Milwaukee, Bosch. The manual hand-crank drill, an object that has existed in essentially the same form since the 18th century. An object that requires no electricity, no battery, no charging cable, no app, no firmware update, and no subscription, was no longer available from any of his wholesale suppliers. It had been replaced, universally and simultaneously, by cordless models with proprietary lithium-ion battery packs. The batteries are not interchangeable between brands. The batteries have a lifespan of approximately 3 to 5 years. The replacement batteries cost between $40 and $80 each. The hand-crank flashlights were gone. The manual can openers, the good ones, the ones with hardened steel wheels and comfortable grips, from the brand his grandfather had stocked since the store opened, were gone. The non-digital thermometers were gone. Not just the mercury ones, which were phased out for legitimate safety reasons years ago. The spirit thermometers, the bimetallic strip thermometers, every thermometer that did not require a battery and a Bluetooth connection to function. The analog multimeters were gone. The manual tire pressure gauges with the sliding scale, gone. Hand-powered garden shears replaced by battery-powered models. Manual pencil sharpeners replaced by electric ones. Hand saws in certain categories replaced by compact, battery-operated reciprocating saws that cost 6 times as much and last a quarter as long. And here is the detail that changed the direction of Blackwell's entire investigation. The replacements were not simply electric versions of the same tool. They were not just battery-powered equivalents. They were connected versions. The new cordless drill from one major manufacturer came with an app. The app connected to the drill via Bluetooth. The app tracked usage, how many holes you drilled, how much battery you consumed, how often you used the tool. The app recommended replacement batteries and accessories. The app offered a Pro subscription for $49.99 per year that unlocked advanced torque settings and personalized maintenance schedules. A drill with a subscription for advanced torque settings. Robert pulled out a wholesale catalogue from under the counter. It was from his main distributor, dated January 2024. He had gone through the entire catalogue, 640 pages, with a yellow highlighter. Every item that had appeared in the previous year's catalogue, but was missing from this one, was highlighted. Every new item that replaced a manual predecessor was circled in red. Blackwell sat at the counter and counted the yellow highlights. 61 items removed in a single year. 61 tools and pieces of hardware that a person could pick up with their hands, use without electricity, repair without a proprietary component, and hand down to the next generation without worrying about compatibility or firmware. Robert counted the red circles separately. 54 new items added to replace discontinuations. Every single one required either a battery, an electrical outlet, or a wireless connection. Every single one was manufactured by one of 3 companies that together control 71% of the North American power tool market. Every single one was priced between 200 and 600% higher than the manual tool it replaced. Robert's assessment was blunt. He had been in the hardware business his entire adult life. He understood margins. He understood product cycles. He understood that manufacturers discontinue slow-moving SKUs and invest in growth categories. That was not what he was looking at. He said, "A customer used to walk in here with a broken fence and walk out with a manual post hole digger, a bag of Quikrete, and enough common sense to fix it themselves. Total cost, $60. Time to complete, 1 afternoon. Now the catalogue steers them toward a powered auger that requires a specific battery pack, a charger, and a warranty registration that involves giving their email address to a company in China. Total cost, $340. And when the battery dies in 4 years, they come back and spend another $60 just on the battery." He paused. "I am not selling tools anymore. I am selling the first hit of a subscription." Blackwell left Athol with Robert's catalogue and a question that had not existed before entering the store. 2 industries, 2 completely different product categories. Pharmaceuticals and hardware. 2 different parts of the country. 2 different economic ecosystems. 2 different customer bases. And the same thing was happening in both. Affordable, independent, functional products were being removed from the supply chain and replaced by expensive, dependent, connected alternatives. The pattern was identical. The vocabulary was different, quote 22 in pharma, quote 23 in hardware, but the mechanism was the same. Remove the simple option, leave only the complex one, wait for the customer to adapt. Was this coincidence? Was this the invisible hand of the free market doing what it has always done, phasing out the obsolete, rewarding the innovative, letting the inefficient die? Or was this something else? Something coordinated, something intentional, something that looked like natural market evolution but moved too uniformly, too simultaneously, across too many unrelated sectors to be organic? The answer to that question came from Patricia Coleman, and it came in the form of seeds. Patricia Coleman runs a seed library in Decorah, Iowa. Not a store, not a business, a library. The concept is ancient, older than currency, older than writing, arguably older than civilization itself. Gardeners borrow seeds from the library. They plant them. They grow crops. They save seeds from the healthiest plants at harvest. They return those seeds to the library. The collection grows. The genetic diversity deepens. The community becomes more resilient. Patricia has been running her seed library for 19 years. She operates out of a converted barn on a property that has been in her family since 1891. She has no employees. She has no funding. She has a network of 412 gardeners across 9 counties who participate in the exchange. In the spring of 2024, Patricia conducted an audit, not because she suspected anything, because she is meticulous. Every 5 years, she compares her catalogue, the list of seed varieties available through her library, against what is commercially available from major distributors. She does this to identify gaps, to find varieties that are becoming rare and need to be preserved, and to evaluate whether new varieties being introduced commercially are worth adding to the library's collection. The results of the 2024 audit were, in Patricia's word, quote, 24. 40% of the heirloom varieties she had catalogued in 2019 were no longer available from any licensed commercial source in the United States. Not 40% of obscure, experimental, niche varieties that only a botanist would recognize. 40% of seeds that families in the upper Midwest had been planting for generations. Varieties with histories measured in centuries. Brandywine tomatoes from a specific pre-1950 strain, the one with the distinctive deep pink color and the flavor that people who grew up eating them describe as quote, _25, gone from every major seed catalog. Rattlesnake pole beans, named for the purple streaks on the pods that look like snakeskin, cultivated by Native American communities long before European contact. Gone. Stowell's evergreen corn, a sweet corn variety developed in 1856 that remained the gold standard for home gardeners for over a century. Gone. Cherokee Trail of Tears beans, a black bean variety carried by the Cherokee people during the forced relocation of 1838, preserved through 7 generations of careful saving and replanting. Gone from commercial catalogues. Still preserved in private collections and seed libraries like Patricia's, but no longer available to anyone who walks into a garden centre or opens a seed website. The varieties had not failed. They had not been replaced by superior alternatives in any agronomic sense. Patricia knows her genetics. She can cite yield comparisons, disease resistance profiles, and nutritional analyses for every variety in her collection. Many of the heirloom varieties outperform their modern replacements in flavor, nutritional density, and adaptability to local growing conditions. What they do not do, what they fundamentally cannot do, by their biological nature, is generate recurring revenue. An heirloom seed, by definition, breeds true. You plant it, you grow it, you save seeds from the harvest. You plant those seeds next year, and the year after, and the year after that. One purchase provides an indefinite supply. The genetics replicate faithfully. The variety sustains itself. This is not a design feature. This is how plants have worked for 400 million years. A patented hybrid does not work this way. A patented hybrid is the product of a controlled cross between 2 parent lines. The first generation, the F1 generation, displays the desired traits: higher yield, uniform appearance, specific disease resistance. But the second generation, grown from seeds saved from the F1 harvest, does not breed true. The traits scramble, the yield drops, the appearance becomes inconsistent. The gardener has no choice but to buy new seeds every year. The biology enforces the business model. Patricia traced the disappearance of each variety through the supply chain. The pattern was consistent. A small, independent seed company would carry the variety for years. Then the company would be acquired by a larger corporation. Then the larger corporation would quote 26, that phrase again, quote 27, as though maintaining genetic diversity were irrational, and remove low-margin, non-proprietary varieties from the catalogue. The replacement varieties were patented hybrids, priced higher, and designed to require annual repurchase. She showed Blackwell her correspondence with 3 separate seed companies that had undergone this transition. The letters were almost identical in tone: professional, corporate, final, underscore, quote, underscore 28, underscore, portfolio optimization. The same language Gerald Hutchins heard from his pharmaceutical wholesaler. The same language Robert Griswold saw in his hardware distributor's catalogue. Different industries, different products, different companies. Same vocabulary, same structure, same result. The affordable, independent, self-sustaining option disappears. The expensive, dependent, recurring revenue option replaces it. 3 industries, 3 towns, 3 people watching something vanish from their world. Gerald Hutchins with his medications, Robert Griswold with his hand tools, Patricia Coleman with her seeds. None of them knew each other, none of them had compared notes. None of them had any reason to believe that their individual experience was part of a larger phenomenon. Gerald blamed the pharmaceutical companies. Robert blamed the tool manufacturers. Patricia blamed the seed corporations. Each of them thought they were dealing with a local problem, a sectoral problem, their problem. Blackwell saw the pattern, and once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. The next 6 months of investigation were methodical. There were no dramatic revelations, no whistleblower meetings in parking garages, no encrypted thumb drives passed in coffee shops, just phone calls, emails. Freedom of information requests that returned heavily redacted documents 8 months later. Public record searches. Supply chain databases that require institutional subscriptions and deliver their data in CSV files with 60 columns and no labels. Industry reports published by consulting firms that cost $300 each are written in impenetrable jargon and put the reader into a coma by page 4. This is what investigative work actually looks like. It is not cinematic, it is clerical. It is reading the same spreadsheet at 2 in the morning for the 3rd time because one number does not match the number in a different spreadsheet, and you need to know why. Douglas Weaver runs a food bank in Galena, Illinois, population 3,100. The food bank operates out of the basement of the First Presbyterian Church on Main Street and serves approximately 230 families per month. Douglas has been running it for 11 years. He knows the food supply chain the way Gerald Hutchins knows pharmaceuticals, not theoretically, but practically. He knows what arrives on the truck, what it costs, what it weighs, how long it lasts, and who needs it. Douglas had been tracking a separate disappearance, canned goods with long shelf lives, the kind that food banks depend on, the kind that emergency preparedness experts recommend, the kind that families in rural areas stock in their basements against hard winters and flooded roads, were being replaced by products with shorter shelf lives and higher price points. He had documented the discontinuation of 11 specific shelf-stable food products from major brands between 2021 and 2024. Canned meats, chicken, beef, and pork in shelf-stable cans with expiration dates of 5 years or more had been reformulated with shorter shelf lives or discontinued outright. The replacement products were premium versions in smaller cans with expiration dates of 18 months. Dried legumes in bulk, 10-pound and 25-pound bags of lentils, split peas, pinto beans, were being dropped by major distributors in favor of single-serve or family-size packaging that contained a fraction of the quantity at a higher per-ounce cost. powdered milk in large format containers, the kind that rural families and food banks buy because it stores for years and provides complete protein, was increasingly difficult to source. The major brands had shifted production to individual serving packets marketed as artisanal or organic at 400% markup. Douglas showed Blackwell his purchasing records. The data was precise. In 2021, he could source a case of 24 cans of shelf-stable chicken from his primary supplier for $31.50. By 2024, the same supplier no longer carried that product. The closest equivalent was a premium line in smaller cans, 12 to a case, for $44. Less product, higher price, shorter shelf life. For a food bank serving 230 families on a budget that depends entirely on donations, this was not an inconvenience. It was an existential threat. Linda Okafor is a nurse practitioner in Meridian, Mississippi. She operates a rural health clinic that serves a predominantly low-income population in a county where the nearest hospital is 47 minutes away, and the median household income is $26,000. Linda had been fighting a different version of Gerald Hutchins's battle, but on a larger scale. Not just one antibiotic, an entire class of inexpensive generic medications that rural clinics depend on for daily operations. Lisinopril, metformin, levothyroxine, ondansetron, prednisone. These are not obscure drugs. These are the 10 most prescribed medications in America. They treat blood pressure, diabetes, thyroid disorders, nausea, and inflammation. They have been manufactured in generic form for decades. They cost pennies per tablet to produce. They are the foundation of primary care in every clinic, every doctor's office, every emergency room in the country. Linda showed Blackwell her supply records for the previous 2 years. The pattern matched Gerald's exactly, but multiplied. Lisinopril, erratic supply, 3 separate periods of complete unavailability, totaling 14 weeks. Metformin, available intermittently, with the extended release formulation, the one most patients tolerated best, absent for 6 consecutive months. Levothyroxine, a thyroid medication that must be taken daily and at a consistent dose, where even small supply interruptions can cause serious health consequences, was back-ordered for 11 weeks. Linda could not tell her patients, quote, 35, quote, thyroid medication is not optional. You take it every day or your body begins to fail. In each case, the quote, 36, was a newer, patented formulation that cost 10 to 40 times more and required prior authorization from an insurance company. Prior authorization in Meridian, Mississippi means paperwork. Paperwork means delay. Delay, for a patient whose blood pressure medication has been interrupted, means risk. Real, measurable, clinical risk. Linda told Blackwell that she had personally witnessed 3 patients admitted to the emergency room with hypertensive crises during periods when their generic blood pressure medication was unavailable and the authorization for the branded replacement had not yet been approved. 3 patients, 3 emergency room visits, 3 bills that would take years to pay, for want of a pill that costs 4 cents to manufacture. Martin Costello owns an auto repair shop in Tonopah, Nevada, population 2,300. The nearest dealership is 120 miles away in Las Vegas. Martin has been repairing cars for 27 years. He works on everything: sedans, trucks, SUVs, farm equipment, the occasional RV whose owner took a wrong turn off Highway 6. His shop survives because he can fix almost anything with a combination of skill, experience, and access to universal replacement parts. Universal replacement parts are the auto repair equivalent of generic medication. They are components manufactured to fit multiple vehicle makes and models. A universal alternator, a universal brake pad, a universal O2 sensor, They are not branded. They are not proprietary. They do not come with a logo or a warranty card or an app. They are made to specification, sold at competitive prices, and available from any auto parts distributor in the country. They are what make independent auto repair economically viable. Without universal parts, independent shops cannot compete with dealerships. Without independent shops, car owners in rural areas have no option except driving 2 hours to have their vehicles serviced. Martin's problem was the disappearance of these parts. Over the previous 3 years, his main parts supplier, a national distributor with warehouses in 6 states, had removed over 200 universal fit components from their catalogue. 200 parts: alternators, starters, water pumps, brake rotors, oxygen sensors, ignition coils, fuel pumps, suspension components. Each one replaced in the catalogue by an OEM-specific equivalent, available only through the vehicle manufacturer's authorized supply chain, at 200 to 500% markup, with delivery times measured in weeks rather than days. Martin pulled his order records. Blackwell counted. In 2021, he could source universal fit parts for 93% of the vehicles that came through his shop. By 2024, that number had dropped to 61%. For the remaining 39%, he had to order OEM parts through dealership channels. The average wait time was 8 to 14 business days. The average cost increase was 310%. His customers, miners, ranchers, long-haul drivers, people who need their vehicles to work because there is no bus, no train, no alternative, could not wait 2 weeks for a water pump. They could not pay $700 for a part that used to cost $190. 6 people, 6 industries. Gerald Hutchins in Glenville, West Virginia, medications. Robert Griswold in Athol, Massachusetts, hand tools. Patricia Coleman in Decorah, Iowa, seeds. Douglas Weaver in Galena, Illinois, shelf-stable food. Linda Okafor in Meridian, Mississippi, generic drugs. Martin Costello in Tonopah, Nevada, auto parts. 6 completely unrelated sectors of the American economy. Different products, different markets, different supply chains, different regulatory environments, different customer demographics. And in each one, the same thing was happening, at the same time, in the same direction. Independent, affordable, repairable, reproducible, self-sustaining products were disappearing. Dependent, expensive, proprietary, subscription-based, recurring revenue products were replacing them. This was not a market correction. Market corrections are messy. They are uneven. They affect different sectors at different rates and different times. Some industries lead, some lag, some are immune. A market correction does not move in lockstep across pharmaceuticals, hardware, agriculture, food processing, healthcare, and automotive parts simultaneously. That is not how markets work. Markets are chaotic. Markets are unpredictable. This was uniform. This was synchronized. This was strategic. And this is the moment where the obvious explanation walks into the room, sits down, crosses its legs, and waits to be acknowledged. Because there is an obvious explanation, and Blackwell has to address it honestly before going any further. The obvious explanation is powerful. It is seductive. It has the weight of 2 centuries of economic theory behind it. And for a portion of the evidence, it is correct. The obvious explanation is this: markets evolve. Consumer preferences change. Technology advances. Companies stop manufacturing products that do not sell well and invest in products that do. This is the natural cycle of creative destruction that the economist Joseph Schumpeter described in 1942. Buggy whips gave way to car parts. Typewriters gave way to computers. Film cameras gave way to digital cameras. Vinyl records gave way to CDs, which gave way to streaming. The old makes way for the new. Nobody conspired to eliminate the horse-drawn carriage. The automobile was simply better. The market spoke. The market chose. And for some of the products in this investigation, that explanation holds up. Nobody is mourning the loss of analog multimeters because they were beautiful objects. Digital multimeters are genuinely more accurate, easier to read, and more versatile. Some hybrid seed varieties do outperform heirloom varieties in raw yield per acre. Some newer medications are genuinely superior to the generics they replaced. More targeted, fewer side effects, better outcomes. Technology improves, products improve. This is real, this is not in dispute. But here is why that explanation, applied broadly to the full pattern, collapses. The products being removed are titles, thumbnail prompts and description. Ниже полная секция скрипт от начала до конца, целевой объем от 16 тысяч до 19 000 слов. A memo was sent to the top 5 retailers in America in the fall of 2023. It was 14 pages long. It carried no dramatic title, no red stamp, no classification marking. It was formatted like every other internal strategy document that circulates between corporate headquarters and regional distribution managers. Arial font, single-spaced, a header that read __, quote _ 37 __. Beneath the header, a distribution list of 11 names, each followed by a title. Senior Vice President of Category Management, Director of Supply Chain Analytics, Regional Inventory Strategist. The kind of titles that exist specifically to make the person holding them sound essential while remaining invisible to anyone outside the building. Blackwell has seen this memo. Not because someone handed it over willingly, not because it was leaked to a journalist at a press conference, not because a congressional subcommittee subpoenaed it. Someone printed it on a Tuesday afternoon in a regional distribution office in Bentonville, Arkansas. They folded it into a plain white envelope. They mailed it to a P.O. box that does not appear in any corporate directory, any public filing, any database that Blackwell has access to. The envelope had no return address. The postmark was from a town 40 miles south of Bentonville, not the town where the office is located. Someone drove 40 miles to mail an envelope. That detail matters. It means someone understood the risk of what they were doing and did it anyway. The only annotation on the entire document, written in blue ballpoint ink on the bottom margin of the last page, was a single sentence. __, quote _ 38 __. Blackwell read the memo 3 times before understanding it. Not because the language was complex. The opposite. The language was so plain, so procedural, so deliberately mundane that the magnitude of what it described slid past on first reading like water over smooth rock. The phrase that matters appears on page 6. In a subsection titled, quote, 39. The phrase is, quote, 40, 3 words, not capitalized in the original, not bolded, not highlighted, not set apart by quotation marks or italics or any typographical signal that the reader should pay attention. Embedded in the middle of a paragraph about quarterly margin targets, as though it were the most natural phrase in the English language, as though placing the word __, quote _ 41 __, next to the word __, quote _ 42 __, next to the word __, quote _ 43 __, should not make anyone stop reading and look up from the page. The phrase is not defined anywhere in the 14 pages. It is not explained. It is not introduced with context or caveats or the careful hedging language that corporations use when they know a term might be controversial. It is presented as though every person on the 11-name distribution list already understands what it means. And they do. They understand it because this is not a new concept. This is not an innovation. This is not a pilot program. This is the formalization of a process that has been underway, quietly, incrementally, across dozens of industries and hundreds of product categories for more than a decade. The Memo did not invent it. The Memo did not start it. The Memo put it on paper. The Memo gave it a schedule. The Memo made it official. But the Memo came later. Blackwell did not start with the Memo. Blackwell started with a pharmacist. This is not a story about empty shelves. That distinction is important to establish now at the beginning because the phrase __, quote, _44__ triggers a specific image in the mind. It triggers the image of bare metal racks, fluorescent lights buzzing over nothing, stripped-down aisles that look like a hurricane just swept through. The images from early 2020 when the pandemic emptied the toilet paper aisle and made the word __, quote, _45__ part of daily vocabulary. That is not what this story is about. Walk into any major grocery store in America right now, today, this afternoon, and you will see what appears to be abundance. You will see color. You will see variety. Towers of produce stacked in careful pyramids by someone who was trained in visual merchandising. Walls of cereal boxes arranged by color gradient, warm tones on the left, cool tones on the right, because a consulting firm determined in 2017 that this arrangement increases time spent in the aisle by 11%. Freezer sections that stretch from one end of the building to the other, humming quietly, packed tight with options. It looks like more than enough. It looks like everything you could ever need. That is the point. That is the design. It is engineered, from the lighting to the shelf height to the width of the aisles, to communicate a single message. There is no scarcity here. But something has changed, and the change is so quiet, so incremental, so carefully managed that most people will never notice it. You will not notice it on a regular shopping trip. You will not notice it scanning the shelves with the loose attention of someone filling a cart from a mental list. You will notice it only when you are looking for one specific thing. One specific product that used to be on the third shelf from the bottom, on the left side of aisle 7, next to the store brand, in the blue package with the white lettering. And it is not there. And you look again, more carefully, because it has been there every time you have looked for the past 5 years. And it is still not there. And you find someone in a vest and you ask. And the person in the vest pulls out a handheld scanner and types something and looks at a screen and delivers the answer in a tone that is neutral and final and contains no useful information at all. __quote _4 6 __. 4 words. And then the conversation is over. There is no explanation offered. There is no alternative suggested. There is no mechanism, no form to fill out, no number to call, no feedback button to request that the product be returned to the shelf. __, quote _47 _ is not an apology. It is not an invitation to discuss. It is a wall, and behind that wall, though the person in the vest does not know this and has no reason to know this, is a 14-page memo. Gerald Hutchins ran a pharmacy in Glenville, West Virginia for 42 years. Glenville is the county seat of Gilmer County. Population 807. It has been approximately 807, give or take a dozen in either direction, for as long as Gerald has been alive. The town sits in a narrow valley where the Little Kanawha River bends sharply to the west. The main street is 3 blocks long. There is a post office, a volunteer fire department, a Dollar General, a Church of Christ, a Church of God, a Baptist church, a library that is open 3 days a week, and, until March of 2024, Gerald's Pharmacy. The nearest alternative pharmacy is a 53-minute drive on State Route 5. Route 5 follows the Little Kanawha northwest toward Parkersburg. It is a two-lane road with no shoulder and a posted speed limit that is largely theoretical. In spring, the river floods and the road closes. Not may close or occasionally closes. Closes. Reliably. Predictably. Twice a year, sometimes 3 times, the water comes up over the asphalt and Route 5 becomes impassable for anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks. During those periods, Gerald's Pharmacy was the only source of prescription medication for nearly 1,000 people spread across 3 hollows and 2 unincorporated communities that do not appear on most maps and have never appeared in any corporate distribution analysis. Gerald did not get rich running this pharmacy. He did not expect to. He did not open the business with a growth plan or an exit strategy or a 5-year revenue target. He opened it because Glenville needed a pharmacy and he was a pharmacist and the building was available. The economics were simple. He filled prescriptions. He sold bandages and adhesive tape and gauze pads and hydrogen peroxide and rubbing alcohol. He kept a wire rack of reading glasses by the front door, sorted by magnification from +1 to +3.5, priced at $8 each. He stocked a small selection of over-the-counter cold remedies, antacids, and antihistamines. He knew every customer by name. He knew most of their medical histories without checking a file, not because he had an extraordinary memory, but because when you serve 800 people for 4 decades, their lives become part of your own. He knew which families had diabetes. He knew which children had asthma. He knew which elderly patients were on blood thinners and which ones forgot to take them and which ones needed a phone call on Monday morning to remind them. He was not, in any formal sense, a healthcare provider. But in a town without a doctor's office, without an urgent care clinic, without a hospital, without any medical infrastructure at all, except a volunteer fire department with a first aid kit and a defibrillator that had been donated by the Rotary Club in 2016, Gerald Hutchins was the healthcare system. In March of 2024, Gerald closed the pharmacy. He did not retire. He did not sell the business. He did not pass it to a younger pharmacist. He did not announce the closure in advance. He locked the front door on a Wednesday morning, taped a handwritten note to the glass with 2 strips of masking tape, and walked to his truck. The note was written on a piece of lined notebook paper, torn from a spiral-bound pad. It said, "I am sorry, it is no longer possible." 7 words, 42 years of service to a community that had no alternative, reduced to 7 words on a piece of paper that would be bleached unreadable by the sun within a month. Blackwell called Gerald in April. The conversation lasted 2 hours and 11 minutes. Blackwell expected to hear about rent increases, insurance costs, regulatory burden, the crushing weight of pharmacy benefit managers who have systematically squeezed independent pharmacies for 2 decades by setting reimbursement rates below the cost of dispensing, competition from mail-order pharmacies, competition from CVS and Walgreens and Walmart, the corporate behemoths that have turned prescription medication into a loss leader designed to get customers through the door so they will buy shampoo and candy bars on the way out. The slow economic death that has been hollowing out small-town America for 30 years. Gerald mentioned all of those things. They were all true. They were all factors. But none of them were the reason he closed. The reason was a single generic antibiotic called amoxicillin clavulanate. Amoxicillin clavulanate, sold under the brand name Augmentin when it was still under patent. A combination of amoxicillin, a penicillin-type antibiotic, and clavulanic acid, a beta-lactamase inhibitor that prevents certain bacteria from breaking down the amoxicillin before it can work. The combination was developed by Beecham Pharmaceuticals, now GlaxoSmithKline, and first marketed in 1981. The patent expired in 2002. Since then, it has been manufactured in generic form by dozens of companies worldwide. It is one of the most commonly prescribed antibiotics on Earth. It is on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines, a catalogue of the minimum medications needed to meet the basic healthcare requirements of any population. It treats ear infections, sinus infections, urinary tract infections, dental abscesses, skin infections, lower respiratory tract infections, bite wounds, bone infections. It is prescribed to children, adults, and the elderly. It is, by every clinical and pharmacological measure, ordinary, routine, unremarkable. It is the medical equivalent of a Phillips head screwdriver. Not elegant, not innovative, not exciting, but so fundamentally useful that trying to practice medicine without it is like trying to build a house without a hammer. For 40 years, amoxicillin clavulanate was the backbone of Gerald's practice, the foundation. The drug he reached for first, prescribed most often, and trusted most completely. A child came in with an ear infection at 4 in the afternoon on a Friday, and the nearest pediatrician was an hour away, and the road might flood by morning. Amoxicillin clavulanate. An elderly man with a dental abscess and no dentist within driving distance. Amoxicillin clavulanate. A woman with a urinary tract infection who worked at the Dollar General for $11 an hour with no health insurance and no savings and no possibility of affording the $80 copay for the branded alternative. Amoxicillin clavulanate. Gerald dispensed it every single day, every single working day for 42 years. Thousands of prescriptions, thousands of infections treated, thousands of people who got better because a 4-cent tablet did what it was supposed to do. The drug was not recalled. This is important. It was not pulled from the market by the FDA for safety concerns. It was not the subject of a black box warning. It was not replaced by a superior alternative. No pharmaceutical company announced a better version, a more effective formulation, a next-generation drug that made amoxicillin clavulanate obsolete. No clinical study was published declaring it ineffective. No regulatory body issued guidance against its use. Everything about the drug remained exactly the same. Its chemistry, its efficacy, its safety profile, its necessity. The only thing that changed was its availability. The manufacturers stopped making it in sufficient quantities. Not suddenly, not dramatically, not in a way that would generate a headline or trigger a congressional inquiry. Gradually, incrementally, the way a river dries up during a drought that nobody official has declared. You do not notice the water level dropping day by day. You notice, one morning in August, that rocks are showing that you have never seen before. And by then, the river has been shrinking for months. First, the shipments became irregular. Gerald would place his standard order with McKesson, the largest pharmaceutical distributor in the United States, a Fortune 8 company, a corporation with annual revenues exceeding $260 billion, and the order would arrive short. He ordered 500 tablets. He received 300. He called. The representative was polite. There was a note in the system. Temporary supply disruption, allocation in effect. Allocation. The word they use when there is not enough to go around and they have to decide who gets what. Gerald, with his 800 customers in a town that does not register on any corporate priority matrix, was not high on the allocation list. 300 became 200. 200 became a note on the packing slip. Back-ordered. Expected availability, 4 to 6 weeks. Gerald waited 4 weeks. He called. Expected availability, 6 to 8 weeks. He waited 6 weeks. He called again. Expected availability, no estimated date. 3 words that mean, we have stopped pretending we know when this will be available again. Gerald called McKesson's customer service line 14 times over a 5-month period. He documented each call in a spiral notebook with the date, the time, the name of the representative, and the substance of the conversation. Blackwell has seen this notebook. The conversations follow an almost identical script. Gerald explains the situation. The representative expresses sympathy. The representative checks the system. The system shows the same thing. Backordered, no estimated date. The representative suggests a substitute. The substitute is a newer, branded combination antibiotic called Augmentin ES600, a reformulated version of the same drug that is still under patent protection, that costs 400% more per course of treatment, and that requires prior authorization from an insurance company before it can be dispensed. Gerald's patients did not have insurance companies, not in the way that the word insurance is used in corporate strategy documents. Some were on Medicare Part D, which covers outpatient prescriptions but requires co-pays and involves paperwork that takes days to process. Some were on Medicaid, which in West Virginia covers prescriptions but reimburses pharmacies at rates so low that dispensing certain drugs actually costs Gerald more than he is paid. Some had private insurance through employers, the few employers left in Gilmer County that offer benefits. And some had nothing, no insurance of any kind. They paid cash. $20 for a 10-day course of amoxicillin clavulanate, $20 to treat an ear infection, a sinus infection, a urinary tract infection, $20 to avoid a 53-minute drive to the next pharmacy, assuming the road was open, assuming they had gas money, assuming they could take time off work without being fired. The substitute drug, the one McKesson's computer recommended, cost $140 for the same course of treatment. Without insurance, without prior authorization, without the 3 to 7 day waiting period, while the insurance company decided whether the patient truly needed an antibiotic for the infection that was currently making them unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to work. Gerald could not ask his patients to pay $140 for an ear infection. He could not look across the counter at a mother working 2 part-time jobs in a town where there are no full-time jobs and tell her that the medicine her daughter needed had increased in cost by 600% and that the reason was not medical but financial. He could not explain to her in any language that would make the situation tolerable that the drug that had cost $20 last month now cost $140 this month because a corporation in New Jersey had decided that manufacturing the affordable version was no longer consistent with its quarterly earnings targets. So Gerald started rationing. This is a word that should not appear in a sentence about American healthcare. Rationing is a word for wartime, for famine, for systems that have failed. But Gerald had no other option. He began cutting treatment courses short, 7 days instead of the standard 10. He reserved his dwindling supply for the most acute cases, high fevers, visible swelling, patients with compromised immune systems. He told patients with mild infections to try over-the-counter remedies first and come back in 3 days if symptoms worsened. This is not how antibiotics work. Incomplete courses of antibiotics are one of the primary drivers of antibiotic resistance, a very crisis that the World Health Organization has called one of the greatest threats to global health. Gerald knew this. He had been a pharmacist for 4 decades. He understood the microbiology. He understood the public health implications. He did it anyway, because the alternative was dispensing nothing at all. He tried to source the drug independently. Over a period of 8 months, Gerald contacted compounding pharmacies in 3 states, West Virginia, Ohio, and Virginia. He reached out to Canadian suppliers who operate in the legal grey zone of cross-border pharmaceutical commerce. He explored online marketplaces that exist in the space between legitimate distribution and outright black market importation. He spent hours on the phone, hours on the computer, Hours doing work that had nothing to do with being a pharmacist and everything to do with being the last line of defense for a community that the supply chain had decided was not worth serving. Every channel led to the same wall. The drug was not illegal. It was not a controlled substance. It was not subject to import restrictions beyond standard FDA regulations. It was not unavailable globally. India manufactures amoxicillin clavulanate in enormous quantities. So does China. So does Bangladesh. The global supply is vast and stable. The drug is manufactured on every inhabited continent. The shortage is specifically, exclusively, uniquely American. Not because the chemistry is different in America, not because the regulations are stricter, not because the manufacturing is harder, because the economics are different. The machinery to produce it exists. The formula exists. The raw materials exist. The patients exist. The need exists. The demand exists. The profit does not. The corporate math, the quarterly earnings math, the return on invested capital math, the shareholder value maximization math does not support manufacturing a generic antibiotic that wholesales for 4 cents per tablet when the same production line, the same workers, the same equipment, the same raw materials can manufacture a patented alternative that wholesales for 37 cents per tablet. 37 cents versus 4 cents. That is the gap. That is the distance between a pharmacy that stays open and a pharmacy that closes. Between a town that has healthcare and a town that does not. Between a child whose ear infection is treated on Friday afternoon and a child whose mother drives 53 minutes on a flooded road to the next pharmacy on Saturday morning. 33 cents per tablet. The margin that a corporation decided was more important than Gerald Hutchins and the 807 people who depended on him. Gerald closed his pharmacy because of one antibiotic. But the truth, as Gerald's ledger books revealed, was worse than one antibiotic. When Blackwell asked him to pull his inventory records, and Gerald keeps meticulous records, handwritten in hardcover ledger books that he has maintained continuously since 1982, 42 years of entries in blue ballpoint ink, the picture that emerged was not a single disruption, but a systematic erosion. Over the previous 3 years, 23 separate medications had either vanished from his supply chain entirely or become so erratically available that he could not reliably promise his patients he could fill their prescriptions. 23 drugs, not experimental drugs, not specialty medications for rare diseases, not cutting-edge biologics that cost thousands of dollars per dose. 23 of the most ordinary, most essential, most commonly prescribed medications in primary care. Amoxicillin clavulanate, lisinopril, blood pressure, metformin, diabetes, levothyroxine, thyroid, prednisone, inflammation, on-direction. Because if this were only about one pharmacist in one town in West Virginia, it would be a tragedy. A genuine, human, heartbreaking tragedy. It would be the kind of story that a local news station covers in a 3-minute segment, that a senator mentions in a press release expressing deep concern, that appears in a healthcare policy journal as a case study and is read by 40 people. But it would be a local story, a contained story, a story with a clear beginning and a clear end and a clear lesson about rural healthcare access. That is not what this is. Blackwell does not investigate tragedies. Blackwell does not tell sad stories about good people who got unlucky. Blackwell investigates patterns, and the pattern here extends far beyond Gerald Hutchins, far beyond Glenville, far beyond West Virginia, far beyond pharmacies, far beyond medications. 740 miles northeast of Glenville, in a town called Athol, Massachusetts, population 11,800, there is a hardware store called Griswold & Sons. It occupies a two-story red brick building on Main Street that has housed the same business since 1947. 3 generations. Walter Griswold opened it with a GI Bill loan after returning from the Pacific. His son Thomas expanded it in the 70s, adding the second floor and a lumber yard out back that has since become a parking lot. Robert Griswold runs it now. Robert is 58. He has a beard that has been grey for a decade and hands that have not been fully clean since he started working the counter at 16. He has a detailed opinion about every fastener, fitting, blade, handle, hinge, and bracket that has ever passed through his inventory, and he will share that opinion at length with anyone who asks, and several people who do not. Blackwell visited Griswold & Sons in June of 2024. The original purpose of the visit had nothing to do with this investigation. Blackwell was following a different lead, a story about building code changes in New England that ultimately went nowhere. But Robert Griswold said something in the first 5 minutes of the conversation that stopped everything, changed everything, redirected the entire trajectory of the investigation. Robert was standing in front of a wall of pegboard shelving that had recently been reorganized. New labels, new product placements, new signage. He pointed to an entire section, maybe 40 linear feet of wall space, floor to ceiling, and said, "Everything on that wall requires a battery now. Everything. 5 years ago, half of it was manual. Now if the battery dies, you own an expensive paperweight." He was not making a philosophical point. He was not being nostalgic for a simpler time. He was not performing the role of the curmudgeonly old hardware man who distrusts anything with a circuit board. Robert understands technology. He sells technology. He is not opposed to power tools. He is opposed to the elimination of the alternative. He walked Blackwell through the section, item by item, with the patience and specificity of a man who has been organizing hardware for 40 years and can tell you the tensile strength of a number 8 wood screw from memory. The hand drills were gone. Not sold out, not temporarily back-ordered, discontinued. By every major manufacturer and every wholesale distributor that Robert works with. Stanley, DeWalt, Milwaukee, Bosch, Makita. The manual hand crank drill, an object that has existed in essentially the same form since the 18th century. An object that requires no electricity, no battery, no charging cable, no app, no firmware update, no Wi-Fi connection, and no subscription, was no longer available through any of Robert's wholesale channels. Not one. He had searched. He had called representatives. He had emailed purchasing departments. The answer was uniform, discontinued, replaced by cordless models with proprietary lithium-ion battery packs that are not interchangeable between brands, that have a functional lifespan of approximately 3 to 5 years before the cells degrade to the point of uselessness, and that cost between $40 and $80 each to replace, assuming the replacement battery is still manufactured when you need it, which is not guaranteed because battery models are revised on a 2-year cycle. The hand crank flashlights were gone. The manual can openers were gone. Not the cheap ones that bend after 3 uses, but the good ones. The ones with hardened steel cutting wheels and comfortable rubber grips, from the specific brand that Walter Griswold had stocked since the day the store opened in 1947, and that Robert's customers had been buying, using, passing down, and replacing on a roughly 15-year cycle for 3 generations. That brand had been acquired by a conglomerate in 2021, and the manual line was discontinued in 2022. The non-digital thermometers were gone. Not just the mercury ones, which were phased out years ago for legitimate safety reasons that nobody disputes. The spirit thermometers, the ones filled with dyed alcohol. The bimetallic strip thermometers, the ones with the metal coil that expands and contracts with temperature. Every thermometer that could tell you how hot or cold something was without requiring a battery and a Bluetooth connection to a phone. All gone from the wholesale catalogue. The analog multimeters were gone. The manual tire pressure gauges, the ones with the small sliding scale that pops out when you press the end onto the valve stem, gone. Hand-powered garden shears in several categories, gone, replaced by battery-operated models that weigh twice as much, cost 4 times as much, and cannot be sharpened with a file. Manual pencil sharpeners, the wall-mounted kind with the hand crank, the kind that every classroom in America had until approximately 2015, discontinued by every distributor Robert uses. Hand saws in certain tooth configurations, replaced by compact battery-powered reciprocating saws that cost 6 times as much, last a quarter as long, and produce a cut that Robert, with 40 years of experience, describes as ugly. And here is the detail that changed the direction of the investigation. The detail that connected Robert Griswold to Gerald Hutchins across 740 miles and 2 completely unrelated industries. The replacement products were not simply electric versions of the same tool. They were not merely battery-powered equivalents performing the same function with a different energy source. They were connected, networked, monitored, monetized. The new cordless drill from one major manufacturer shipped with a companion app. The app connected to the drill via Bluetooth Low Energy. The app tracked usage, how many holes you drilled, how many screws you drove, how many minutes of trigger time you accumulated, how much battery capacity you consumed per session. The app displayed this data in graphs and charts. The app recommended replacement batteries and accessories based on your usage patterns. The app alerted you when your warranty was approaching expiration. And the app offered, for $49.99 per year, a pro subscription that unlocked advanced torque profiles, personalized maintenance schedules, and priority access to firmware updates. A drill, a hand tool, an object whose fundamental purpose has not changed since a Roman carpenter bored a hole in a plank 2,000 years ago, with a subscription for firmware updates. Robert pulled out a wholesale catalogue from under the counter. It was from his primary distributor, dated January 2024. 640 pages. He had gone through the entire thing, every page, every listing, every SKU with a yellow highlighter. Every item that had appeared in the 2023 catalogue but was missing from the 2024 catalogue was highlighted in yellow. Every new item that had been added to replace a discontinued manual tool was circled in red ink. Blackwell sat at the counter with the catalogue and a cup of coffee that went cold and counted. The yellow highlights, 61. 61 items removed in a single catalogue year. 61 tools, pieces of hardware, and functional objects that a person could pick up with their hands, use without an external power source, repair with basic workshop skills, and hand down to the next generation without worrying about whether the battery model would still be manufactured in 20 years. The red circles, 54. 54 new items added to replace the discontinued products. Every single one required either a battery, an electrical outlet, or a wireless connection to function. Every single one was manufactured by one of 3 parent companies that together control 71% of the North American power tool market. Every single one was priced between 200 and 600% higher than the manual tool it replaced. And 31 of the 54, more than half, included some form of digital connectivity. An app, a Bluetooth chip, a QR code linking to a registration portal that required an email address, a physical address, and agreement to a terms of service document that was 9,400 words long. Robert summarized the situation with the bluntness of a man who has been selling hardware for 4 decades and has no interest in euphemism. He said, 5 years ago, a customer walked in here with a broken fence. I sold him a manual post-hole digger, a bag of Quikrete, and 10 minutes of advice. Total cost, about $60. He went home, dug the holes, set the posts, fixed the fence. Done. One afternoon. He paused. Now the catalogue steers him toward a powered auger that needs a specific lithium battery pack, not compatible with any other tool he owns, a charger, a registration, and a warranty activation that involves giving his email address to a company in Guangzhou. Total cost, $340. And in 4 years, when the battery won't hold a charge anymore, he comes back and pays another $60 just for the battery. If they still make that battery, which they might not. He looked at Blackwell and said, "I am not selling tools anymore. I am selling the first hit of a subscription." Blackwell left Athol with Robert's highlighted catalogue, a notebook full of SKU numbers, and a question that had not existed before walking into the store. 2 industries, 2 completely different product categories. Pharmaceuticals in West Virginia, hardware in Massachusetts. 2 different parts of the country, 2 different economic ecosystems, 2 different regulatory environments, 2 completely different customer bases. And the same thing was happening in both. Affordable, independent, functional, durable products were being removed from the supply chain. Expensive, dependent, connected, subscription-generating products were being installed in their place. The pattern was identical. The vocabulary was different, quote, 66 in pharma, quote, 67 in hardware, but the underlying mechanism was the same. Remove the simple option, leave only the complex one. Wait for the customer to adapt. Call the adaptation quote, 68 Was this coincidence? Was this the invisible hand of the free market doing what it has always done, rewarding innovation, punishing inefficiency, letting the obsolete die so the superior can flourish? Or was this something else? Something that moved too uniformly, too simultaneously, across too many unrelated sectors to be the result of independent market forces acting independently? The answer came from Decorah, Iowa, and it came in the form of seeds. Patricia Coleman runs a seed library. Not a store, not a business, a library. The concept is not modern, it is not alternative. It is not a lifestyle brand, or a hobby, or a movement. It is a practice older than civilization, older than currency, older than writing. For as long as human beings have cultivated plants, roughly 12,000 years, they have saved seeds from the harvest and shared them with their neighbors. This is how agriculture works. This is how agriculture has always worked. The entire edifice of human food production, from the first wheat fields in the Fertile Crescent to the corn belt of the American Midwest, rests on a single, ancient, profoundly simple act. You grow a plant, you keep the seeds, you plant them again next year. Patricia has been running her seed library for 19 years. She operates out of a converted barn on a property in Winneshiek County that has been in her family since 1891. She has no employees, no storefront, no funding from any government agency, non-profit organization, or corporate sponsor. She has a network of 412 gardeners across 9 counties in northeastern Iowa and southeastern Minnesota who participate in the exchange. They borrow seeds. They grow crops. They save seeds from the healthiest, most productive plants at harvest. They return those saved seeds to the library. The collection grows. The genetic diversity deepens. The community becomes more self-sufficient. The system works because it has worked for 12,000 years. In the spring of 2024, Patricia conducted an audit of her seed catalogue against what was commercially available from major distributors. She does this every 5 years. It is meticulous work, cross-referencing her catalogue of over 300 varieties against the active listings of the 12 largest seed companies in the United States. She does it to identify varieties that are becoming rare and need to be more aggressively preserved, to evaluate whether new commercial varieties are worth adding to the library, and to maintain an accurate picture of what is available to the average American gardener who does not have access to a seed library. The results of the 2024 audit were, in Patricia's word, devastating. 40% of the heirloom varieties she had catalogued in her 2019 audit were no longer available from any licensed commercial source in the United States. Not 40% of obscure varieties that only a professional botanist would recognize. 40% of seeds that families in the upper Midwest had been planting for generations. Varieties with names that carry history, varieties with stories. Brandywine tomato, pre-1950 strain, the one with the deep pink skin and the dense, almost meaty flesh, and the flavor that people who grew up eating them describe as what a tomato is supposed to. С точки обрыва. Это финальная часть секции скрипт. Текст начинается ровно с того места, где предыдущее сообщение оборвалось. Taste like. Gone from every major commercial seed catalog in the United States. Patricia checked 12 distributors, 0 listings. A tomato variety that has been cultivated continuously in America since at least the 1880s. Erased from the commercial supply chain as though it never existed. Rattlesnake pole beans, named for the dark purple streaks on the green pods that resemble snakeskin. Cultivated by indigenous communities in the southeastern United States long before European contact. Carried through generations, adapted to local soils, local climates, local growing seasons through centuries of patient selection. Gone from 10 of 12 major catalogues, available from 2 small independent seed companies, both of which Patricia identified as acquisition targets by the same parent corporation that had already absorbed 3 of their competitors. Stowell's Evergreen Corn. A sweet corn variety developed by Nathan Stowell in 1856 in Burlington, New Jersey. For over a century, it was the most widely planted sweet corn in American home gardens. Not because of marketing, not because of branding, because it tasted extraordinary, and it grew reliably, and it bred true year after year after year. A family could plant Stowell's Evergreen in 1890, and their great-great-grandchildren could be eating the same corn in 2020 from seeds that traced an unbroken genetic line back to that first planting. That is what heirloom means. It means continuity. It means independence. It means you do not need to buy it again. Stowell's Evergreen, gone from every major distributor. Available only through seed libraries, private collectors, and 2 non-profit seed banks that Patricia supports with her own money. Cherokee Trail of Tears beans, a black bean variety carried by the Cherokee people during the forced relocation of 1838. The Trail of Tears, one of the most devastating acts of governmental cruelty in American history. 16,000 Cherokee forced to march over 1,000 miles. 4,000 died. And somewhere in that column of suffering, someone carried seeds. Someone, in the middle of losing everything, their land, their homes, their autonomy, their lives, had the foresight to carry seeds. Because seeds are the future. Seeds are the promise that even when everything is taken, something can be planted again. Those seeds survived. They were cultivated by Cherokee families for 7 generations. They were shared with other gardeners. They entered the broader American seed exchange. They were grown in gardens across the country by people who understood what they represented. Not just food, but resilience. Not just a crop, but a story. Gone from commercial catalogues. Available only through the same fragile network of libraries and private collections that preserves everything else the market has decided is not worth selling. Patricia Coleman has Cherokee Trail of Tears beans in her library. She saves them every year. She distributes them to gardeners who request them. She understands that she is not just preserving a variety, she is preserving a piece of history that a corporation in St. Louis calculated was worth less than the shelf space in a catalogue. Patricia traced the disappearance of each variety through the supply chain. The mechanism was consistent, mechanical, almost elegant in its efficiency. A small, independent seed company would carry the variety. The company had been in business for decades. It had loyal customers. It operated on thin margins but stable demand. Then a larger corporation would acquire the company, not in a hostile takeover, in a friendly acquisition, a polite offer, a handshake, a press release about, quote, 71, quote, and, quote, 72, quote. Then, within 18 to 36 months of the acquisition, the new parent company would, quote, 73, that phrase again, quote, 74, as though maintaining genetic diversity that has sustained human agriculture for millennia is irrational, as though a seed that reproduces itself, that feeds a family indefinitely from a single purchase, that represents thousands of years of careful selection and adaptation, is an inefficiency to be corrected. The rationalization always followed the same pattern. Low-margin varieties were flagged for review. Review meant a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet compared revenue per catalog page against the cost of maintaining seed stock, quality testing, packaging, and distribution. Heirloom varieties, by their nature, scored poorly on this metric. They were not patented. They could not be patented. They generated a single sale per customer per lifetime, because the customer could save seeds and never buy again. The spreadsheet did what spreadsheets do. It optimized. It identified the quote, 75, It recommended removal. The replacement varieties were patented hybrids. F1 crosses engineered for specific traits, uniform appearance, simultaneous ripening, disease resistance to specific commercial-scale pathogens. The hybrids performed well in the first generation, but the second generation, grown from saved seeds, did not breed true. The traits scrambled. Yield dropped. Appearance became inconsistent. The gardener had no choice but to purchase new seeds the following year. The biology enforced the business model. The business model was encoded in the DNA. Patricia showed Blackwell correspondence from 3 seed companies that had undergone this transition. The letters were strikingly similar, not identical in wording, but identical in structure, in tone, in the specific phrases used to make elimination sound like progress. Quote 76 portfolio optimization, permanent inventory removal, long-tail SKU rationalization. 3 phrases from 3 different industries: pharmaceuticals, hardware, agriculture. 3 completely different vocabularies describing 3 completely different products in 3 completely different markets. And all 3 phrases mean exactly the same thing. We have decided that the affordable, independent, self-sustaining option does not generate enough recurring revenue, and we are removing it. 3 people, 3 towns, 3 industries. Gerald Hutchins in Glenville, West Virginia, watching medications vanish. Robert Griswold in Athol, Massachusetts, watching hand tools disappear. Patricia Coleman in Decorah, Iowa, watching seed varieties go extinct. None of them knew each other. None of them had ever spoken. None of them had any reason to believe that their individual experience was connected to anyone else's. Gerald blamed Big Pharma. Robert blamed the tool manufacturers. Patricia blamed the seed corporations. Each of them thought they were dealing with a local problem, a sectoral problem, their problem. Blackwell saw the pattern. 3 data points in 3 unrelated industries producing the same result on the same timeline. That is not a coincidence. That is not market evolution. That is a signal. The next 6 months were methodical. No dramatic revelations, no clandestine meetings, no encrypted files on thumb drives passed in parking garages. Just work, phone calls, emails, Freedom of Information Act requests that returned heavily redacted documents 8 months after filing, public record searches in 9 states, supply chain databases that require institutional subscriptions and deliver their findings in CSV files with 60 columns and no headers. Industry reports from consulting firms, McKinsey, Bain, Deloitte, that cost $300 each are written in jargon designed to impress rather than inform and reliably put the reader to sleep by page 4. This is what investigative work actually looks like. It is not cinematic. It is not thrilling. It is clerical. It is reading the same spreadsheet at 2 in the morning for the 3rd time because one number in column R does not match the corresponding number in a different spreadsheet, and you need to know why. 3 more names emerged from that work. 3 more people in 3 more industries experiencing 3 more versions of the same disappearance. Douglas Weaver runs a food bank in Galena, Illinois, population 3,100. The food bank operates out of the basement of the First Presbyterian Church and serves approximately 230 families per month. Douglas had been tracking the disappearance of shelf-stable food products, canned meats, dried legumes in bulk, powdered milk in large format containers, all being replaced by smaller, more expensive, shorter shelf life alternatives. 11 specific products documented between 2021 and 2024. Not discontinued because of low demand. Discontinued because the per-unit margin on a 25-pound bag of lentils is lower than the per-unit margin on a single-serve artisanal lentil cup that contains a fraction of the product at 4 times the price. Linda Okafor is a nurse practitioner in Meridian, Mississippi. She runs a rural health clinic serving a low-income population in a county where the nearest hospital is 47 minutes away, and the median household income is $26,000. Linda had documented the same pattern Gerald Hutchins experienced, but multiplied across an entire formulary. Lisinopril, blood pressure, erratically available. 14 cumulative weeks of stockout in 2 years. Metformin, diabetes, the extended-release formulation absent for 6 consecutive months. Levothyroxine, thyroid, back-ordered for 11 weeks. In each case, the recommended substitute was a newer patented formulation costing 10 to 40 times more, requiring prior authorization that took days to process while patients went unmedicated. Linda personally witnessed 3 patients admitted to the emergency room with hypertensive crises during gaps in blood pressure medication supply. 3 hospitalizations, 3 5-figure medical bills. For want of a pill that costs 4 cents to manufacture. Martin Costello owns an auto repair shop in Tonopah, Nevada. Population 2,300. Nearest dealership 120 miles away in Las Vegas. Martin had documented the removal of over 200 Universal Fit auto parts from his primary supplier's catalog over 3 years. Universal alternators, universal brake pads, universal oxygen sensors, each replaced by OEM-specific equivalents, available only through manufacturer-authorized supply chains at 200 to 500% markup, with delivery times measured in weeks. In 2021, Martin could source Universal Fit parts for 93% of vehicles that came through his shop. By 2024, 61%. His customers, miners, ranchers, long-haul drivers, people who need their vehicles because there is no bus and no train, could not wait 2 weeks for a water pump, could not pay $700 for a part that used to cost $190. 6 people, 6 industries: medications, tools, seeds, food, drugs, auto parts. 6 completely unrelated sectors of the American economy. Different products, different markets, different supply chains, different regulatory environments, different customer bases, and in each one, the same phenomenon: affordable, independent, repairable, reproducible products disappearing, expensive, dependent, proprietary, subscription-based products replacing them, simultaneously, uniformly, strategically. This was not a market correction. Market corrections are messy, uneven, unpredictable. They affect different sectors at different rates. Some industries lead, some lag, some resist entirely. A market correction does not synchronize across pharmaceuticals, hardware, agriculture, food production, healthcare, and automotive parts at the same time in the same direction with the same vocabulary. That is not how markets work. This was coordinated, not by conspiracy, by consensus. And this is the point where the obvious objection must be addressed. Because there is an obvious objection, and it carries the weight of 2 centuries of economic orthodoxy. The objection is, markets evolve. Consumer preferences change. Technology advances. Companies stop making products that do not sell and invest in products that do. This is creative destruction, Schumpeter's term from 1942. Buggy whips yielded to car parts. Typewriters yielded to computers. Film cameras yielded to digital. The old makes way for the new. Nobody conspired to kill the horse-drawn carriage. The automobile was better. The market chose. For some of these products, that explanation holds. Digital multimeters are genuinely more accurate than analog ones. Some hybrid seeds outperform heirlooms in raw yield per acre. Some newer medications are genuinely superior to the generics they replaced. Technology improves, products improve. This is real, but applied to the full pattern, the explanation collapses. And it collapses on a single, verifiable fact. The products being removed are not being removed because consumers stopped buying them. They are being removed because their per-unit margin is too low. Gerald Hutchins dispensed amoxicillin clavulanate every single day until the day it became unavailable. Demand was constant. Patricia Coleman's seed library has a waiting list. Demand is growing. Robert Griswold cannot keep manual tools in stock on the rare occasions he manages to source them. Demand is present. Douglas Weaver's food bank clients need shelf-stable bulk food more than ever. Linda Okafor's patients need 4-cent blood pressure pills more than ever. Martin Costello's customers need universal parts more than ever. The demand exists. The products are disappearing anyway. Because the decision to remove them was not based on demand. It was based on margin, revenue per square foot, revenue per catalog page, revenue per manufacturing hour. The products are not failing. They are being failed, deliberately, on a schedule. And there is a second, more sophisticated objection. Consumers chose this. They voted with their wallets. If people wanted manual drills, they would buy manual drills. This objection sounds reasonable until you examine the sequence of events. Patricia Coleman documented it precisely. She tracked the availability of 12 specific seed varieties at 4 major online retailers from 2019 to 2024. In every case, the sequence was identical. Step 1, the variety was listed and available. Step 2, the variety was listed but frequently out of stock. Step 3, the variety was listed but marked discontinued. Step 4, the listing was removed entirely. At no point during this sequence was there a measurable decline in consumer orders. At no point did customer reviews indicate dissatisfaction. The product was removed from the platform, and once it was gone, there was no mechanism for consumers to demand it back. You cannot add an item to your cart if the item does not have a listing. Robert Griswold confirmed the same pattern from the hardware side. He pulled 5 years of order history for the 61 highlighted items removed from his wholesale catalogue. 53 of the 61 showed stable or increasing order volumes in their final year of availability. They were not slow sellers that died of neglect. They were steady performers that were executed. The choice was not made by consumers. The choice was made for consumers. And then the absence of the product was retroactively interpreted as evidence that the choice was correct. The product was removed, then its absence was cited as proof that nobody wanted it. The catalogue was changed first. The consumer behavior followed, not the other way around. This has a name in behavioral economics. It is called choice architecture manipulation. You alter the set of available options. Then you describe the resulting behavior as a free choice. But there is nothing free about a choice made from a menu that someone else has edited. And then the memo arrived. The source will not be identified. The method of delivery will not be described beyond what has already been said. These are not negotiable points. What Blackwell can confirm, the document is real. It is 14 pages. It is dated September 2023. It was distributed internally to senior category management teams at 5 of the largest retail chains in the United States. The cover page reads, Q4 Inventory Optimization, Phase 3. The subtitle, Long-Tail SKU Rationalization and Permanent Inventory Removal. Page 1 is boilerplate. Revenue projections, quarterly targets. The language of corporate strategy that exists to make everything described within sound routine, inevitable, boring. Page 2 introduces the concept. Long-tail SKUs are products that sell consistently but in low volume relative to shelf space occupied. They are the products that have been in the catalogue for decades. They have loyal but small customer bases. They generate steady but unspectacular revenue. The memo calls them legacy inventory. The word legacy in corporate language does not mean heritage or valued tradition. It means old thing we have not gotten around to eliminating yet. Page 3 contains a chart. 2 axes, the horizontal axis, revenue per square foot. The vertical axis, customer dependency index. The memo defines customer dependency index as the likelihood that removal of this SKU will drive the customer to a higher margin alternative within the same retail ecosystem rather than to a competitor. It is, in plain language, a measure of how captive the customer is, how few alternatives they have, how trapped they will be when the affordable option disappears. Products in the upper right quadrant, high revenue, high dependency, are labeled retain. Products in the lower left quadrant, low revenue, low dependency, are labeled Phase 3 candidates, permanent removal. Page 6 is the list. Category 1. Generic pharmaceuticals with per unit wholesale cost below $2. Category 2. Manual hand tools without electronic components. Category 3. Broad-spectrum antibiotics in generic form. Category 4. Heirloom and open-pollinated seed varieties. Category 5. Shelf-stable food products with expiration dates exceeding 36 months. Category 6. Universal fit automotive replacement parts. Category 7. Analog measurement and diagnostic instruments. Category 8. Non-connected home appliances, appliances that function without Wi-Fi, without an app, without a cloud server. Category 9. Paper-based navigation and reference materials, physical maps, printed directories, paper manuals. Category 10. Off-patent medical devices and supplies. 10 categories, 10 types of product. Blackwell read the list and understood immediately why someone had driven 40 miles to mail it. Because page 6 is Gerald Hutchins. It is Robert Griswold. It is Patricia Coleman. It is Douglas Weaver. It is Linda Okafor. It is Martin Costello. 6 people's entire lived experience, their struggles, their losses, their bewilderment, their anger, reduced to 10-line items in a strategy document formatted in Arial. Every single category shares the same characteristics. The products are affordable. They are durable. They are repairable by the owner. They do not require electricity, connectivity, a subscription, or an ongoing relationship with the manufacturer. They do not generate recurring revenue. They do not lock the consumer into an ecosystem. They do not create dependency. And that is precisely why they are being removed. The memo does not use the word ___, quote _ 91 ___. It does not use the word ___, quote _ 92 ___. It does not need to. It uses ___, quote _ 93 ___, quote _ 94 ___, quote _ 95 quote _ 96 __. These are the words that make elimination sound like progress, that make erasure sound like evolution, that make a deliberate, strategic decision to remove affordable independence from the market sound like the natural order of things. Blackwell went back through every interview, every data point, every highlighted catalogue and frustrated phone call and meticulous ledger entry, and every single one mapped to the memo. Gerald Hutchins was Category 1 and Category 3. Robert Griswold was Category 2 and Category 7. Patricia Coleman was Category 4. Douglas Weaver was Category 5. Linda Okafor was Category 1 and Category 3. Martin Costello was Category 6. 6 people, 6 states, 6 industries, 1 spreadsheet. The strategy has a name in supply chain literature: dependency consolidation. The term appears in academic papers from the early 2000s. The principle is simple. If a consumer can meet their need with a cheap, durable, independent product, that consumer generates 1 sale and 0 recurring revenue. But if the independent product is removed and the only available alternative requires a battery, a subscription, a proprietary refill, a connected app, or an annual repurchase, then every subsequent interaction with that need generates revenue. The first sale is the entry point. Everything after is the profit. This is not theoretical. It is in the catalogue. It is on the shelf. It is the reason Robert Griswold sells drills with apps. It is the reason Patricia Coleman cannot find seeds that American families have grown for 200 years. It is the reason Gerald Hutchins taped a note to his door and walked away. Now, what Blackwell needs to say, clearly, before this ends. The memo was distributed to 5 retailers, 5 competitors. They do not coordinate pricing. They do not share supply chains. They are not a cartel, but they share consultants. They share data analytics firms. They share the same supply chain optimization software built by the same 3 enterprise vendors. They subscribe to the same industry research. They attend the same conferences. They hire executives from each other's companies in a rotating carousel of senior management that ensures the same strategic assumptions circulate through every boardroom in the sector. When the same strategy is recommended to 5 companies by the same class of advisors using the same data, the result is indistinguishable from coordination, even without a single coordinating phone call. You do not need a conspiracy when you have a consensus. You do not need a secret meeting when everyone in the room already agrees. 5 companies, same consultants, same data, same strategy, same timeline, same result. So, 10 categories of products being quietly removed from American retail. Not by a villain, not by a conspiracy, by a spreadsheet, by a formula that measures the value of a customer not by what they need, but by how much they can be made to spend. By a system that has concluded, category by category, line item by line item, that independence is an inefficiency to be corrected. The antibiotic that kept a small town healthy for 42 years was not profitable enough. The hand drill that a father could teach his son to use on a Saturday afternoon was not profitable enough. The seed that a grandmother saved from last year's garden was not profitable enough. The canned meat that sat on a shelf for 5 years and fed a family during a hard winter was not profitable enough. The blood pressure pill that cost 4 cents and kept a woman out of the emergency room was not profitable enough. The universal brake pad that an independent mechanic could install in an hour was not profitable enough. None of these products failed. They were failed, deliberately, systematically, on a schedule, by a memo. And here is where it would be easy to end with despair. To say, they have already won. The catalogue is already changed. The supply chain is already redirected. The products are already gone. The system is too large, too entrenched, too well funded, too deeply embedded in the infrastructure of American commerce to resist. That is not the ending. Despair is not information. Despair is the absence of information, and Blackwell deals in information. The window is still open. Every single item on the memo's list still exists. Not at the store on the corner, not from the retailer that removed it, not in the catalogue that was rationalized, but somewhere. Gerald Hutchins's antibiotic is manufactured in India and available through international pharmacy cooperatives that operate legally under personal importation guidelines. The cost is 11 cents per tablet. Robert Griswold's hand tools are made by small manufacturers in Vermont, in Oregon, in Pennsylvania, companies with 12 employees and no Bluetooth chips, selling direct through their own websites. Patricia Coleman's seeds exist in libraries, in private collections, in the vaults of non-profits, the Seed Savers Exchange, Native Seeds/Search, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, organizations that have been preserving genetic diversity for exactly this moment. Douglas Weaver's shelf-stable food is produced by regional companies that never appeared in the major catalogues and never will. Martin Costello's universal parts are machined by independent shops that refuse to sign exclusivity agreements with dealership networks. The products exist. The infrastructure to produce them exists. The demand exists. The knowledge exists. What is being removed is not the product itself. What is being removed is the convenience, the visibility, the assumption that it will be there when you need it, the effortless certainty that you can walk into a store and find it on the shelf where it has always been. And that is the strategy. Not to ban these things, not to make them illegal, not to criminalize their possession or their use, just to make them slightly harder to find, slightly less visible, slightly more inconvenient to purchase, because invisibility, over time, achieves the same result as prohibition. If you do not know something exists, you cannot choose it. If you cannot choose it, you will choose what is in front of you. And what is in front of you has a battery, has an app, has a subscription, has a recurring charge. Blackwell has been building a database, not of what is missing, of where to find it. Every alternative source, every independent manufacturer, every seed library, every compounding pharmacy, every machine shop that makes universal parts, every regional food producer that still sells 25-pound bags of lentils with a 5-year shelf life. The database is not finished. It may never be finished because the memo's list is still growing. But the database is growing faster, and that, for now, is enough. The memo was sent to 5 retailers. It listed 10 categories. It recommended permanent removal. The retailers followed the recommendation. The shelves were rearranged. The catalogues were updated. The supply chains were redirected. And the products, one by one, quietly, incrementally, deliberately, became harder to find. Then harder. Then invisible. But invisible is not gone. Not yet. Blackwell started this investigation with a pharmacist who closed his doors in a town of 807 people because he could no longer source a 4-cent antibiotic. The investigation ended with a 14-page document that explained why. Between the closed door and the document, there are 6 names, 10 categories, and 1 question that every person listening to this should answer for themselves. The question is not whether this is happening. The evidence is in the catalogues, in the ledger books, in the highlighted pages, in the memo itself. It is happening. The question is not who is responsible. The memo carries 11 names on its distribution list. The consultants who wrote the strategy publish their frameworks openly. The data analytics firms that built the models advertise their services on their websites. Responsibility is not hidden. It is simply diffused across so many participants that no single one of them feels accountable. The question is simpler than both of those. What do you need that you have been assuming will always be there? The medication, the tool, the seed, the food, the part, the thing that works without a battery, the thing you can fix with your hands, the thing that does not require a password or a subscription or a connection to a server in a data center 1,000 miles away. What is that thing for you? Find it, source it, secure it, while the window is still open, while the listing still exists, while the manufacturer is still in business, while the seed is still viable, while the pharmacy is still taking orders, while the catalogue still has it on page 412, highlighted in yellow, scheduled for removal in the next quarterly rationalization. The memo is still in effect, the list is still growing, and Gerald Hutchins's pharmacy is still closed. Next, Blackwell turns to something closer to home, literally. 14 states have quietly passed new regulations reclassifying common household activities. Things your grandparents did without a second thought. Things your parents considered basic self-sufficiency. Collecting rainwater. Repairing your own appliances. Storing more than a certain quantity of food. Growing certain plants in your front yard. In some states, these are now code violations. In some, misdemeanors. In 3 states, under specific circumstances, they are felonies. The new laws that made your basement a crime scene, that is next.